All right, so to help us unpack now these allegations, the implications, we're going to be joined by crime expert Professor Nirmala Gopal. Prof, good morning and thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for your time at this hour. We've heard some of the remarks coming through from this week's ad hoc committee work. And so Paula Sullivan appearing in person after citing concerns about health and security as well, refusing to answer some personal background questions that predates the 1990 period as well. Let's get your reaction to what's unfolded as Sullivan, of course, took to the stand this week.
So good afternoon, Lisa, and good afternoon to your viewers. Yeah, very interesting witness, I must admit. And I think for me, the words that stand out when I listen to him is that his evidence was quite politically charged, contentious, and I think somewhat dramatic as well. In addition to that, I think there were bits of his evidence that to me sounded extremely credible. He definitely, in most instances, had really thorough documented information. I think where the contention and the drama and perhaps the heated part of bits of his evidence was actually when he implicated senior officials from within SABC, which I think then when you dissect it even further, interrogate it even further, the implications are that there are politicians who are also involved in the kind of corruption that we are experiencing or we have experienced, and that which is being exposed by both the ad hoc commission committee as well as the Nhlanhla commission.
Yeah, and so with these parallel accountability processes unfolding, let's also look at earlier on, again, just to the point about he refusing to answer anything pre-94. What did you make of that? What information then could have been contained before 1994? Also, the fact that he could not recall quite a few of the events. How do you find the credibility of Sullivan then as a witness, given what's unfolded this week?
Yeah. So from an objective lens, Liesl, I think, part of why he didn't want to provide that kind of information is that it was a very different era, of course, in the first instance, an era that privileged white people or a particular race group. And I think, as you listen to his testimony, one realized that in some ways, I thought he was able to very cleverly manipulate the previous era. And perhaps knowing that, having that kind of knowledge, he probably realized that this was not going to augur well in his favor, especially when he made the transition into, submitting that he was here to change the lives of all people in the country. But of course, one would know, and I think those questions very categorically came through from the members of parliament in terms of the fact that you arrived here largely because you wanted to change the lives or you believed you could influence a better life for a certain group of people in the country. So I think by and large, that might have been the reason why he didn't want to necessarily answer questions of, predating 1999. But I think where the members of parliament went wrong is that it seemed as though many of them did not have enough information or good idea of the pre-1994. I want to take it to 1994 or pre the new constitution, 1995. The kind of landscape, socio-political landscape that existed during that period versus the post-socio-political landscape that we have existing now. And I think based on that, he was able to very clearly, very carefully dodge the kind of questions that he was being asked. And I think in some ways, he realized that they were not well informed, they were not properly prepared. And I'm talking about, the majority of parliamentarians. And that one would gauge through the kind of questions they were asking. And of course, then he knew that he could get away with giving quite flippant responses.
And, Prof, even if we look at his background story, the information that then did come to the fore, how he came into the country as a tourist and then as an investor, Upon settling, he then got involved with policing. So he served as a reservist and then he went into training. And when we look at the implications of these claims about his policing background and the role that they've also played at large in policing, particularly national security, what came to the fore for you on that front?
So I think by and large, Liesl, is who allowed him, who were the gatekeepers that allowed him to transcend into those spaces? So I don't necessarily think that he should be held accountable for that, but those who gave him the permission to work or play in those spaces. I mean, he's a citizen, so in terms of the actors, he's not a state actor. He wasn't a state actor. And how did he move so expediently from being a private citizen into a state space that is so highly securitized and politically laden? So I think those who allowed him that should actually be held accountable. And then, of course, whatever laws that he had transgressed at that time and going forward, he should absolutely be held accountable. But for me, it sounds like he found the loopholes in the systems, the previous system as well as the current, in the early years of the transition, and then he exploited those loopholes.
And so, Prof, although O'Sullivan obviously appeared before the ad hoc committee and not yet at the Nhlanhla Commission, the issues intersect. They obviously mirror what the Commission's work is also all about. And so when we're looking at, the influence that this testimony could have on the work of the Commission as well. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Does Parliament's work strengthen or complicate matters when it comes to prosecution then as we continue?
Okay, so I think in terms of, if you think about O'Sullivan's testimony, I think what he has done is that he has provided allegations, some of them very serious allegations. So in that respect, it would make the Commission's work a little easier because now they can test those allegations, because he also aligns them with specific individuals and largely individuals in senior positions within SAPS. So I think therein it's easier. And yeah, so I think on the whole, he has his testimony is a pathway into what the Nhlanhla Commission can now take to the next level, and largely to test the allegations against him and against the senior officials or anyone else that's been involved in criminal activity.
Because, Prof, we also tried to ultimately understand what the ad hoc committee was trying to or hoping to establish through his testimony as well. Do you think that was successfully achieved? You've spoken about how you felt they were inadequately prepared, and some of them obviously as the probing continues, and how central now what he has echoed becomes into, regarding the broader scheme of what we're trying to unpack in the CJS at large.
Liesl, my view at that point in time is that they didn't achieve what they should have, actually. I thought that the questions were too general, I think they were too politically laden. So instead of asking questions that could have unpacked, especially his role in security, and unpack that at a more granular level, I think they wasted a lot of time worrying about his qualifications, etc. Because yes, that can be tested somewhere else. They could seek that information, from the institutions that he claims to have had those qualifications, etc. And by and large, I think they lost a golden opportunity.
Okay, so Prof, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for weighing in at this hour. Of course, we're going to continue as the work continues, but Professor Nirmala Gopal, UKZN criminologist, weighing in on what transpired as we wrapped up at the ad hoc committee this week. We also drew parallels in some of the issues in the Nhlanhla Commission, of course, as we spoke to Andy Mashaile as a security expert. And so those parallel systems and accountability measures continuing, and we'll bring you that on the SABC as we continue to bring you all that coverage that matters when it comes to South Africa and its sovereignty.